Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson. Today, I am excited. I'm also apologetic. I had a computer issue, and I'm on a loaner computer, and I cannot get my microphone interface to connect to this loaner. So you've got kind of a headphone mic audio. I get the computer back tomorrow, so we'll be back up, better audio quality tomorrow. While we're doing announcements, next week, the show's going to be released instead of first thing Wednesday morning, midday Wednesday. So that will be just one little intricacy of next week. It's going to be just a slightly later release. We're just accommodating our guest who needs to record Wednesday morning. So it'll be right after we finish recording Wednesday morning. And today I'm very excited about this podcast. I think it's just a fun one. I like checking in with these players, big name players who, might be at, a moment where you wonder, like, where does this go? And I think we've had a lot of moments with Brooks Koepka at this point. And, he didn't have I wouldn't say it was necessarily an underwhelming year in the scope of things, but it definitely was a year with high expectations that weren't, delivered. And I think there's just a lot of questions about where is he at? So I am joined by Brentley Romine from Golf Channel and Joseph LaMagna from Friday Golf, and we dive into Brooks Koepka, a little bit on the past, a little bit on his upbringing. This was not meant to be a full-blown detailed dig into everything he's done, because there's a lot. He's got 5 majors, a lot of close calls. But more, here's where we've been, here's where we are, and where do we think he's going in 2024? Obviously, Live season kicks off now, and we're getting, it's crazy to say this. I'm always surprised this time of year. We're not that far away from the Masters. We're basically 2 months away from the Masters. It is going to be kind of the lead in there. And as we've seen the last couple of years, the pro golf calendar just goes so quickly once you hit the Masters. It is just boom, boom, boom. And next thing you know, you're like, wait, we don't have a major for 8 more months. What's going on? So we're getting to that point where we got to start to think about the Masters a little bit more. And I think Rory's win at Pebble last week is going to spark that. So, all right, before we get to our podcast, let's talk about our friends. These are definitely our friends at Golf Genius. We've used Golf Genius for the last handful of years to administer our events, our Friday golf events. And let me tell you, honestly, when we started using them, it made our lives so much easier to run events. This is what they do. They provide tournament management software. It's a platform for managing golf events and golf tournaments. They work in 60 plus countries and at 11,000 plus clubs, resorts, and public golf courses. They also are used by PGA sessions, golf associations. They say this, these are my notes here, saves the pro shop hours of prep work and helps deliver a great experience for golfers. I don't think there's any more true. As someone who was in the trenches without this and trying to deliver a great golfer experience of an event, this is without a doubt true. This is a company that makes running golf events way easier. I think, this is a no-brainer if you're trying to put together something. They've got mobile scoring, live leaderboard. It's really fun if you're playing in the event and you're able to follow. So if your golf course doesn't have it, ask for it. If you run a golf course and you don't have it, you should get it. You're going to run better events with it. You can learn more at golfgenius.com. That's golfgenius.com. And big thanks to Golf Genius for our partnership. We love our partnership with Golf Genius. It makes our Friday golf events way better. So, all right, let's get to talking about a different Golf Genius. Golf Genius on the course, without a doubt. it's kind of like amazing when you think back about Brooks Koepka and all these majors. It's like he's just been a force of nature the last 10 years. So let's talk about Brooks Koepka. All right, we are back. I'm excited about this podcast. We've done a couple of these player-focused podcasts. We did one on Jordan Spieth, and as well as Justin Thomas. It's almost like a state of the union on these players. Today we're going to hit on Brooks Koepka. This is, I think, like since I got into this job, probably, the most. I think the player with the most high moments in the last 8 years. I think he's obviously won 5 major championships in the last 7 years. He's been a absolute force at majors, but also is one of the more unique players in the sense that major success doesn't necessarily equal piling up wins on the PGA Tour or the LIV Tour. He's been, a player that rises to the occasion in the big moments when the golf gets really hard, and been a player that, maybe he's loafing the other weeks. Maybe he's just not expending his mental energy, but he has been, without a doubt, the player, I would say, of the last 7 years, if you focus in on major championship golf. I'm joined by Brentley Romine from Golf Channel, as well as Joseph LaMagna from Fried Egg Golf to talk about this. Guys, I wanted to start it out. I have so many vivid Brooks memories from his majors and all the majors he's won. What's the memory, like the shot or the moment or the stretch of golf that you remember the most?
All right, I'll lead it off. So it's kind of crazy because I think back and he's won 5 major titles now, and I was fortunate enough to be at 3 of them. And I think the thing that sticks out the most to me is the battle with Tiger Woods. It wasn't necessarily with Tiger because Tiger was a couple of groups ahead, but I just remember it felt like it was like 110 degrees. There were so many people there. Tiger made 8 birdies, and I think maybe his best final round in a major ever at Bellerive, and still couldn't track down Brooks. And toward the end, there was a shot on 16. It was like 247 yards, and he just rips like this towering iron shot to like 6 feet. And that was just that was the exclamation point on that win. And then like the way it was on 18, there was like this catwalk that you had to walk. It was probably about almost 100 yards. And there was just this sea of fans. And I just remember like the image of him just walking across with Jenna, and then they like walk right past Tiger, like coming out of scoring. And so that's kind of like the image. It's kind of funny. Out of all the places that he's won, it's funny that Bellerive kind of sticks out the most.
I think you said, going toe to toe with Tiger, but like, I mean, of the players of this like kind of late 2010s into the 20s, he ran into Tiger at the 19 Masters too. Like that was another, like I don't know if there's any player that's like in that, Spieth, Justin Thomas, Brooks Koepka thing that have had 2 run-ins at majors with him. One he won, one he lost.
Well, he also was paired with Tiger early at, I believe it was the 2019 PGA. He played the first 2 rounds, and he shot the course record tying 63 at Bethpage. And then one of his first major rounds was with Tiger as well. He played the final round at Oak Hill in 2012 and shot 77. So it's funny to see the growth of Brooks from a kid off the Challenge Tour in 2012 shooting 77. And it's like, this guy doesn't have it to, frankly, he's probably gotten the best out of Tiger more often than not.
Yeah. Tiger, asterisk on when you got the best out of Tiger, I think. But yeah, I mean, he's gotten the best out of most people in majors, right? I think that's the resounding thing. Joseph, what's your moment?
Maybe I'm cheating, Andy, because I'm not picking a moment. I'm picking a quote, and this is probably one of my favorite quotes about a golfer ever. This is a quote I come back to every time Brooks is at the top of a major championship leaderboard, which is fairly often, which is a quote from Steve Williams in 2015 to Golf Digest, in which Steve Williams, who's seen some good golf, says, "Once in a great while, a player comes along who hits a golf ball the way it was meant to be hit. Powerful, piercing, the perfect trajectory. Of the young players out there, one I've seen has that special ball flight, Brooks Koepka." He goes on, says a couple more lines, and then he says, "Obviously, he's searching to find the other parts of the puzzle, but I haven't seen a ball flight like that since Tiger, and before that, Johnny Miller." And that's 2015, before Brooks has even won a major. I think it's a really cool quote. And going back, preparing for this pod, watching some major championship final rounds again, some highlights from Brooks, I think that's what stands out to me the most about Brooks is that ball flight, that he's just striking it differently than other guys in the field. See that at Aaron Hills, see that at Shinok, just these unbelievable piercing stock fades, but also a lot of draws with his long irons. There just aren't many players in the modern era who can hit an iron like Brooks Koepka.
It's a heavy ball flight, right? It feels like when he hits the ball, it just everything like the sound. There is a distinct sound with his interaction with the ball and the turf.
He's one of the few guys who you can feel the shot. And I hate to compare him to like a player who hasn't really done much, but the only other guy that I've kind of been around that is kind of known for that is Jack McGuire, another Florida State guy. I know it's almost blasphemous to compare Koepka, but it's very similar. And I don't know, maybe Florida State likes recruiting the same guys. I had another quote that is my favorite Brooks quote. Since Joseph is sharing quotes, this is the best Brooks Koepka quote from his entire life. So he basically has just been born. He's laying in his bassinet. It's in the hospital, and the pediatrician comes in, or the doctor comes in, and he's looking at Brooks, the baby, and he turns around to his mom, Denise, and he says, quote, "This is the most serious child I've ever seen in my life," end quote. And that to me, that quote just sets the tone for Brooks Koepka. I mean, it's a perfect description of him.
It's interesting. If we're talking about quotes, one of my favorite things he said,
I think I know where you're going here, Andy,
was "I'm only playing against a couple guys in a major." Mm-hmm. I think about that all the time because it's legitimately how I used to think about State Am qualifiers. And Brooks, to me, that it's wild that Brooks took the same philosophy that I would about like trying to qualify for a State Am to a major championship. And the theory is like half the guys shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Half the guys that should be there aren't going to play well. And then with Brooks, he took it to like a whole, like, I'm better than the half the guys that should be there that are playing well. And then it comes down to like, I only have to beat a couple guys at a major. They're easier than anything else. And I mean, I find it amazing because like it kind of speaks to like that supreme talent, supreme confidence, but also like this understanding of really how tournament golf works. You know, I think like him and DJ got cast into this like kind of bombers, like they're the Bash brothers, and like DJ
giving each other the needle.
The quotes from DJ, but I think like when you get down deep rooted into each of them, they are like golf savants in terms of like the understanding of golf and competitive golf. And there is a layer to Koepka of like physicality, I think, that also comes through and he intimidates other players.
Andy, you talk about golf intelligence and going to moments from Brooks's career that stand out. One that hadn't stood out to me that I went back and watched and was struck by, and I'm curious if either of you guys remember this, but the final round at Shinok, Brooks's bogey on 11 is really interesting to go back and watch, where he pulls this iron shot long left, and he's in jail, and
isn't he playing with DJ? I think he's paired with DJ too.
I believe you're correct. You're correct. Brooks knows he can't leave that chip shot short, and that's another thing that I think Dustin Johnson has spoken to before. Like when he's short-sighted, he's not going to go for the hero shot and potentially leave himself in jail. So Brooks like hits it over and into the bunker, and it's not in a good spot, but he wasn't going to leave it short and makes an incredible up and down for bogey. He makes like a 15-footer to save that bogey. It goes on to win the tournament, obviously by 1. I'd kind of forgotten about that moment, but for as good of a ball striker as Brooks is, when you go back and watch a lot of these majors, he also putts incredibly well and holes so many crucial putts that kind of look nonchalant, but it's this relentless ball striking paired with an ability to get up and down when it counts and to make a lot of clutch putts. So that bogey in particular stood out to me, and I was curious if either of you even remembered that, because I had not.
I remember that. I like my moment is the back nine at Shinok, really, the entire back nine. I thought that was, that was a day where players were just like tapping out. And it was like a total like secession of like, oh, maybe this guy could win. Oh, he's gone, And at the end of the day, the man left standing was Brooks Koepka. And it was because of the way, like, he astutely calling out 11. One that I always will never forget is 14, the long par 4, where he had to chip out because he drove it into the tall stuff. He chips out and he's got, I think it was, I didn't rewatch this, but as I remember, he had like about 60-yard wedge to a front pin, not an easy shot downwind. And he bounces that wedge up to like, 14 feet or so and makes the putt. And I think like the through line of all Brooks's majors is like, just like he never gives stuff away. And it is like the constant momentum whenever he needed the momentum putt to make the par, or in the case of the 11th hole, a bogey. Like he never gave away that extra shot, and he kind of kept the train on the tracks and going. And Shinok, to me, is like the tournament that magnifies and like shows off everything, because every guy kind of bailed out of that tournament.
Well, he was kind of forgotten too going into that tournament, because remember, he had that wrist injury at the end of the previous year. He missed the Masters that year. And I think it was one of those things where it was one of those, a long list of Brooks being slighted examples where he may not have been mentioned on like a Golf Channel notables list or something. And so that was the chip on his shoulder that week. And I think he but he got off to a really bad start that tournament too. He was something like 7 over through his first 21 or 22 holes, and then played the rest in 6 under, which that was, of course, we lost the golf course Saturday. Phil was, putting around on the green. And one of my favorite moments too from that tournament, and this doesn't have much to do with Brooks, but do you remember Phil and the kid with the Donald Duck hat?
No.
In the final round on Sunday, there was a kid who had a Donald Duck hat, and Phil every hole would go over and rub it. And there's a video online, but for some reason that just kind of sticks out. But not to get on a huge tangent, but yeah, no, that was a crazy week. That was, I don't know, seeing like mentioning that shot on 14, Andy, where he was like hitting out of the like cabbage. Like, I don't know. I feel like people were so surprised that he was able to come back from that injury so quickly. And that just sets the table for all of these injuries pretty much, like with the knee surgery and the Masters. And I think it just boils down to the fact that Brooks is just tougher than everybody else. And it's always kind of been that way.
It's I mean, that parlays a little bit into coming up. I think like he took, obviously this is very well publicized, but he took a different path to the PGA Tour. He went up through the Challenge Tour. He played in Europe, and his coming out party was really like the Pinehurst US Open is where he became a household name, the Martin Keimer Pinehurst US Open. But there's this Brooks Koepka, this young, big American player who, had been playing in Europe that kind of burst on the scene there. Obviously, the Waste Management win was his first one, but Brentley, you've covered amateur and college and pro golf for a number of years now. What was kind of Brooks as an amateur, and what was he thought of as a heading into college and then turning professional? What was he considered?
He was along the lines of a player that was a very regional player. Like we've seen some of those in the past decade or so with maybe a Maverick McNeely or a Justin Suh. And a lot of it was necessity. Like the Koepkas didn't have a lot of money growing up. They obviously had two, budding golf talents to fund their careers. So Brooks played a lot of FJTs in Florida, and he really wasn't. He was a good player. He won an AJGA. He had a bunch of top tens. He would play in their invitationals, but he wasn't I'm trying to think of the guys in his recruiting class, but he wasn't a Blaine Barber, or there was a kid named Wesley Graham who was also really good, who didn't quite pan out. But I think when he went to Florida State, he was kind of known as this hothead. Like he had a lot of talent, had these broad shoulders, had the ball striking, had the sound, all that. Like he had everything he wanted, but he was an absolute head case. And Chris Malloy, who's the head coach at Ole Miss now, he was the assistant at Florida State under Trey Jones. And I mean, there's stories where Malloy would, be making Koepka run stadiums, and he'd be at the bottom with a trash can, and Koepka would puke into the trash can and then head right back up the stairs to do it another stadium. And there was a 5-second rule too in college where Brooks, because he would break clubs. And so he basically had to put the club in the bag within 5 seconds. Otherwise he'd get, he'd have to run stadiums or do extra gym time. But then after a while, none of that would work because Brooks just thought of the stadiums as, oh, that's just my cardio for the day. You couldn't quite crack him. And it's funny because I talked to Malloy the other day, and I was asking him, when was the turning point? Because Brooks now is known as this, this uncrackable, just mental force. But I'm when was the turning point for him? And I think it was his sophomore year. His mom had just been diagnosed with cancer toward the end of that previous year, and so Brooks was dealing with that. But then also he was contending at their home tournament, and he blew a shot out of bounds, and he just started F-bombing and just really making a scene of himself. And he lost so much focus that he gets in, signs his card, and he signs for the wrong score. And so he DQs himself, and the team goes from beating, I forget who they were playing. It might have been Georgia Tech or something, or Virginia, beating them by 9 by only beating them by 1. And that moment, where he felt like he almost left his teammates down, was the moment where he kind of realized, all right, I have to grow up. And it obviously wasn't a complete 180 after that, but that was kind of the moment where he went from being a good college player with a hot head to actually putting together tournaments and being a first team All-American and leading them to the NCAA championship in 2012 and really being the reason why they even had a chance at match play. That's another interesting story. That 2012, we talk about shots, for the longest time, he said the most clutch situation that he's ever been in was at Riviera in 2012. He's on the 18th green. Daniel Berger is just throwing up all over himself. He three-putted the green.
DB.
But
just a drive-by from
this is a worthy drive-by.
Just a drive-by.
Well, I think Daniel Berger
he didn't sign up for a Berger drive-by here, Brentley.
No, so I mean, Berger. I've talked to Berger about this. It's in my oral history of this NCAA championship. But so Brooks had a 7-footer for par slider on 18 at Riv, and he was in the last group, so he knew what it meant, and it was to send his team into a playoff with Kent State for the final spot and match play. So he makes it, and he called that the most high pressure putt for years. And to button up this story, the next morning they go out and it's a playoff. They play 2 fivesomes, and it's best aggregate score. And the final group that Brooks is in is is Koepka, Daniel Berger, who's a freshman, and then Corey Connors, Pendy, and Mac Hughes. So you have 5 tour players. Yeah, 5 players, all tour players, all in this playoff. And Daniel Berger makes a double bogey basically from the fairway. He hit it like 40 yards short of the green and then flubbed a chip and missed a putt. It was awful. And Koepka made the only par, I think, on Florida State. But yeah, Kent State ended up winning that playoff without making a par, which was pretty crazy. But yeah, I talked to Brooks about that in a few years back, and the only thing he said was the only thing he remembers from that NCAA championship is that Berger choked, like to this day. Just he's like, yeah, I remember Berger choking.
Brentley, I mean, hopefully this isn't, I don't think this is jumping ahead too much. Brooks comes out to the Challenge Tour, right? A little bit of an unconventional route. Like, I feel like now this is generalizing, but each year there's a couple college players where it's like, all right, that might be a tour player. How was Brooks thought of when he left college? Because I feel like it's hard to go back in time and remember exactly, unless you followed college golf super closely, what you thought of Brooks Koepka as a prospect at the time. Like, yeah, how are people thinking about him?
I mean, he was probably, I mean, he won 3 times in college. He had a really consistent, last couple of seasons too, to where he was finishing T7 and T11, things like that. He was really solid. I would say he was probably a top 10 guy coming out, but back then it was weird. It seemed like you had to be, one of the top 3 guys in Wagger to get starts, like to get sponsor exemptions. And that was the big thing and the big reason why he went to the Challenge Tour. And I forget who even recommended it. It might have been Rocky Hambrick, his agent, recommended him go to the Challenge Tour, but it was because he didn't get any sponsor exemptions. Like
it's like this through line with Brooks of like never really being respected, like the big name, like, and he becomes through his play a force in the game. But like, I mean, he never was one of the blue, like effective golf blue bloods. Like you think about, he was never Spieth or Justin Thomas, in terms of like the fanfare and accolades and everything, and didn't get the exemptions, and it created this other path. But then that continues with like, when he is talking about these slights, it like became a fabric of who he was as a competitor, or who he is as a competitor.
Yeah, and that was like a golden age of college golf too. I mean, right in that kind of 3-year period between like 2011 and 2013, you had Patrick Cantlay turning pro, you had Spieth turning pro, you had Justin Thomas turning pro. I mean, obviously Koepka. So I mean, it was just all these stars.
Don't forget Thomas Peters.
I mean, we can't forget Thomas Peters, the NCAA individual champion that year at Riv.
Where did he go to school?
He went to Illinois. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Illinois is really good at making match play. I'll give you that. But yeah, no, that Challenge Tour like excursion. I think it was maybe late last year, that video of Brooks riding around in that little car in India, like while he was on the Challenge Tour, and he's doing like a vlog and he's just loving it. It's so weird because I feel like Brooks loves the team aspect, and like he'll tell you that. But then there's times where he'd also say like, I don't want to be friends with any of these guys. Like I don't have any of their phone numbers saved. And so I've always kind of treaded lightly with kind of what comes out of Brooks's mouth, just because I think sometimes he tries to say things, to kind of trick his mind into believing something. And maybe sometimes he contradicts himself. But yeah, I think deep down Brooks has always kind of liked, maybe not so much the team aspect of the Challenge Tour, but I think he's always liked this kind of self-torture, that sort of like running the stadiums in college, or, cramming, 4 guys in a car riding around Kazakhstan and sleeping in his car and things like that. I think he enjoys that. I think he enjoys it being tough, and he enjoys the grind. And it's kind of almost Navy SEAL type, where you kind of perform the best when you're in pain and, in these high pressure situations. And it's,
I think it's also something like he obviously, he's made many comments through the years about how golf isn't a real sport, and how, he wanted to be a baseball player and stuff. And I imagine that when he was playing the Challenge Tour, there was an aspect of it that probably in his mind made it feel like minor league baseball,
Mm.
you know, and the things that minor league baseball players go through to, you know, to get to the top, you know, to the big leagues.
His first win on the Challenge Tour was 54 holes too. So everything kind of comes back around again. Hey, he beat your guy Pavan in one of those Challenge Tour events.
I mean, it depends on what you say he beat. He won that event, but he finished third on the order of merit that year, and you know, finished number one is Pavan. So you know, who really won?
Pavan.
So he goes to the Challenge Tour. He wins his first year on Challenge Tour. He didn't get, like, in the Challenge Tour, you have to finish in the top 5. I mean, for people that don't know what the Challenge Tour is, it is like it's the European Tour's version of the Korn Ferry Tour, which is, it's like a way more thrifty Korn Ferry Tour, way less money and way more obscure venues. I mean,
the travel is
you're
insane.
going. Yeah, you're going all over the world and like to really random places, such as Kazakhstan, right? So anyways, he wins in his first year, and then the next year he won 3 times on the Challenge Tour, which got him a 3rd place spot on the Order of Merit, which then earned his European Tour card. So the year is 2014, and he's a European Tour player at this point. So kind of just give everybody an idea of where we're at on the Koepka, you know, train. So 2014, he's got his European Tour card. He's played in a couple majors, and this is where the big kind of breakout comes at the U.S. Open, where he finishes 4th. He goes on later in the year to win on the European Tour. He won late in the season, which, you know, catapulted him up into where he got, I think he got his PGA Tour card through world ranking, correct?
Well, no, so he got it through his PGA Tour card.
Yeah,
he actually got it through like not the special temporary, but like through non-member points. And I think it was at Pinehurst that he actually locked up his card when he was T4 there in 2014. But you mentioned how that was kind of his breakout, Andy. There was one golf legend who that was not the moment where he realized who Brooks Koepka won, because there's a moment at Valhalla at the PGA later that year where Tom Watson he's looking for Harris English for something, and he comes across Brooks Koepka's group, and Koepka hits a drive, and he's walking down the fairway, and Tom Watson is talking to him, and he says, "What club are you a head pro at?" So he mistook Brooks Koepka for a club professional at the 2014 PGA. It never ends with him.
Wait, can we go a little on that? Like, as we're talking about the slights, I do feel like that's a massive part of Brooks Koepka's journey. And just looking through, like, it wasn't on the Walker Cup, right, Brentley? Revisiting the 2015 President's Cup, when you go back and look at him not being a captain's pick and them going with Bill Haas and JB Holmes instead, despite Brooks won that year in Phoenix, as I believe both JB Holmes and Bill Haas also won that year. But Brooks's results in majors put theirs to shame in 2015. In 2015, Brooks made the cut in all 4 majors, finished 10th at the Open, 5th at the PGA, 18th at the US Open, 33rd at the Masters. Like he made the cut in all 4. He's playing very well, has a win, and doesn't get picked for the President's Cup team. When you just pile that on his name being mispronounced at the U.S. Open at Erin Hills, I believe, and his winning, maybe it's during the trophy ceremony, not being listed as a notable, as Brentley already has alluded to. And I believe that was maybe the 2018 U.S. Open, despite being the defending champion. I think Golf Channel showed the notables during the first round, and Brooks was not mentioned. And he might have even tweeted about that. Like the boys club and Brooks not really feeling a part of it, always being slighted. Like, it's not all a figment of his imagination. It feels like there are a lot of slights along his journey, which probably informs the person he is. I don't know if that's necessarily why he went to live. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it is kind of interesting to think about him always being overlooked, maybe never taken quite as seriously as some of his peers.
Well, remember Brandel, the Brandel stuff when Brandel was doing the podcast with Jaime. Man, that was a great podcast. I wish that was still going on. But he said something like, Jaime asked him, and this was after Tiger won the 2019 Masters, and he said something like, when Tiger plays Brandel and he's healthy, like, is he the best player still? And Brandel said yes, basically in a roundabout way. And then he said the only two players who can come close to him are DJ and Rory. And then he mentioned Rahm, and then he mentioned Spieth. He didn't even mention Koepka. And that was when Koepka tweeted the Brandel with the clown nose.
Clown, yeah.
And then that same, because that was in May, right before Bethpage. And that same championship, the pre-tournament presser, Brooks's, I remember it was right after Tiger's, and Tiger's is jam-packed. It's standing room only. And as soon as Tiger's done, Brooks is walking in and the media, it's just a mass exodus. And, some people stayed, but Brooks definitely noticed half the room just getting up and leaving once Tiger was done speaking. And Brooks is, the defending champion and already a 3-time major winner at the time. So, it's crazy. And I feel like I side with Brooks on this too, because I feel like, maybe, us as journalists kind of were off put by the cockiness, by the attitude, and maybe didn't give him quite the due that he may have deserved.
Yeah. I can get, I get both sides. And I think like one of the things is like great competitors. You watch the Last Dance and you watch some of the things that Michael Jordan used to do to get up for the random Tuesday night, Wizards game or Bullets then game. And it's like, this is what crazy competitors do. And I think like Brooks absolutely used all this fuel for the betterment of his golf game, right? Like he is someone that that it helps provide an edge. I think like it shows when he doesn't have an edge, he doesn't really perform. And that's the explanation, I think, on the PGA Tour stuff, is that the majors provided that heightened importance and pressure that he kind of needs to play his best level of golf.
What was it that he said before the final round at Harding Park? Didn't he say something like, all these guys, like, none of them have won a major. DJ only has one. I don't even know a lot of the other guys up there.
He basically called his shot on the eve of the final round, right? And said that he was going to win, basically.
Just feels like, to your point, Andy, like he has always tried to find those ways to motivate himself, whether he's making them up or not. And probably often not. Like he was just straight up overlooked in a lot of situations.
So the story of Brooks is obviously majors. And as you alluded to, 2015 is when it starts to percolate. This is where things are starting to happen in majors with Brooks. He goes 33rd at the Masters, first Masters he ever played in. 18th at the U.S. Open. This was after last year's T4. Then he goes T10, T5. The next year, he plays 3 out of the 4. He goes T21, T13, misses the Open, and plays the PGA. He finishes 4th there. And then it gets us to 2017. He finishes 11th in the Masters. He wins the U.S. Open. So he wins the 2017 U.S. Open. That's his first U.S. Open. That is at Erin Hills. I honestly think like people didn't count this as a major because of the scoring at Erin Hills. There was like, again, he wins a major. And I think there are people that were upset that JT didn't win, that about how the golf course set up. But it's kind of treated like it wasn't a major. Like there are people that, this shouldn't count because it was Erin Hills and so on and so forth. And I kind of think this is just like another thing that Brooks can turn into a slight.
I loved this major. Like
I enjoyed it too. When I look back, I really loved it.
If you go back and watch it, how his ball striking is absolutely insane.
He missed like 10 greens the entire tournament and only made he didn't make a double bogey, and he only made one bogey on the back nine the entire week. It was just insane.
It's a stripe show.
He was so good. And it's like, I think like the discourse got so bad that week with the width of Aaron Hills, because I think honestly why the discourse went so south on the weekend was that people didn't want Brooks Koepka to win, and they wanted something from the golf course to stand in the way of him winning. But the reality is probably is if you made it a narrow golf course, he would have won by even more.
Yeah, that was a really cool mate. I mean, Scotty was the low AM that week.
Brian Harmon was in the mix.
Xander's kind of coming out party too in majors.
JT goes nuclear on Saturday, right? And I think that's to your point, Andy. People wanted him to win.
Hideki was right there too.
Mm-hmm. That might have been Big Stu's first U.S. Open too.
That was, yeah. I mean, well, and at that time, it's also important to think. I walked a practice round with Jordan Spieth, and at this time, Jordan Spieth and Cameron McCormick were talking about how to get to 18 majors, like what had to happen. And you just think about like the sliding doors moment. Like, I don't think they knew that the major championship player from that era was going to play the event, and it wasn't them, you know?
Yeah, and that was an interesting, because Brooks came into that major not playing that well. Like, I think he was like T37 in Memphis the week before. He had missed 4 or 6 cuts to start that year. Had been like outside the top 30 for a month at that time. And there's like a really famous story about him and Pete Cowan that week. And basically Pete Cowan just lit into him. And it kind of even goes back to college golf. I feel like Brooks's dad, Bob, basically gave the keys to like Brooks's coaches, like whoever was coaching him. And I think it continued to the pros. You basically had to almost physically beat Brooks Koepka up to get him to listen. And I think this is like a really famous story with Pete Cowan that week. He just ripped into him, and Brooks ended up signing a flag for him afterwards and said, "Thanks for like getting on my ass," or something like that. And there's been, I think, some moments where Brooks has kind of asked Pete to do the same thing. And I think after this year's Masters was another moment like that. But yeah, that I going back and kind of researching this, that was something that came up, was this moment with Pete where he basically just said, like, you need to have an attitude of a champion and stop being like a petulant child. And he did.
I'll just say, I mean, talk about the major championship performances, and there are a bunch of, have some stats pulled on that. I think what was enlightening in going through this deep dive on Koepka is how many majors he almost won. And I think it's easy to overlook that sometimes. I mean, correct me if I'm missing one, but he almost won at Pebble 2019, almost won the 2019 Masters. He's in the mix with Tiger, almost wins at Harding Park, right? That we just referenced that quote from the night before. Almost wins Kiowa with Phil, where Phil slow plays him. Almost won the 2023 Masters. It looked like he was going to win the 2023 Masters before he kind of starts to fall apart and Rahm overtakes him. But that's 5 more right there that he won 5, and he could still win a couple more. We could, I'm not going to say that all 5 of those could have gone his way, but he easily could be standing here with 7 right now.
He said that too. Like he said, I think the quote was, I should have 8 majors.
The other thing about it is like, it's so different than like a Faldo who won 6. And it's like, wait, like he won basically every time he had a chance to win, he won, you know?
And
I think
Brooks,
that's like,
Brooks has this crazy conversion rate too. I think Brooks has converted like 4 or 5 54 hole leads as well. The only one not being maybe Tiger.
One stat I found really interesting that just speaks to how often Brooks has been in the mix. He puts together a bunch of top 5s essentially over an 8-year period, right? 2017 to 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2015. I think it's 2015 to 2023 is like really when he does a lot of his damage. The stat I wanted to pull is like, who has put together the most top 5s in an 8-year period in the 21st century, right? So I think Brooks here, his max is like either 2015 through 2022. That's 8 years, or 2016 to 2023. I can't remember. Tiger
This is
put
majors
up 19.
only, right?
Sorry?
This is majors only, right?
Majors only, right? Most top fives in an 8-year period. Tiger had 19. Ernie Els had 14. Brooks and Phil both had 12. And Spieth had 11. And then it drops off after there. So pretty incredible, those names that Brooks is surrounded by. And credit to the Spieth for being up there too as one of the other players who's more of a younger generation. But I mean, you're talking about Brooks, Phil, Ernie, and Tiger.
The major stuff's crazy. It's like, and I think like the other thing that people like have a hard time with Brooks and like the love of Brooks is he's just not rolling up and winning at other non-major events, right? Like I think there's like we just saw it with Rory winning at Pebble, like how big of a deal it is and how much like love people have for him winning there, and it's like Brooks would just go finish like T32 for a month.
Yeah, he
showed up an hour before his tee
crapped on
time at
those
Southland
events, too. He I think people didn't like the fact that and not only did he not care, but he told you that he didn't care about him. And I think that really rubbed people the wrong way, because it's like, well, like you play on the PGA Tour, bro. Like no one wants to, like, I don't know. I feel like he's been so negative to the point of maybe making an effort to try to be like Michael Jordan or be like one of those guys. And it's just not himself, because as we've talked about, like Brooks really cares what people think about him. And he really cares like about his standing in the game, but mentally, like he wants to be the other guy. And so I think he's done a lot of things in his career, that being one of them, to where he's maybe sabotaged himself because he's trying to be someone that he's not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's been like all part of the aura, right? And I think like part of I think there has to be something with the players too, where they have to wonder how this guy does it, where he just doesn't, he shuts off seemingly for most of the year, and then every major comes out and kicks our ass. Like, how's he doing this? You know?
So I was talking with Luke Clanton last year, and this was right around the time he was winning the 3 straight college events in the spring. And he won the Valspar, which is down at the Floridian where Brooks practices. And Brooks spent some time with the team. And that's another thing about Brooks too, is I think he does a lot of things behind the scenes too. Like he sent the private jet for Florida State, like his own jet, and flew him down, spent like a day with him. But he was practicing with Luke, and Luke asked him like pretty much that thought, Andy, like how does he do it? And I think the quote was, Brooks told Luke, he basically just goes brain dead. Like he tries to play golf brain dead to where he's not thinking about anything. And
that's what he says.
That's very hard to do.
In the Full Swing Netflix documentary, right? There's the episode that profiles Brooks and Scotty, and Brooks says that when Scotty's playing well, he's not thinking about a single thing, and Brooks wasn't in that place mentally at the time of that interview. So I think that only just reinforces that Clanton advice.
Yeah, there was one tournament, one major too. It might have been 2023 or 2019 against Tiger, where Ricky Elliott talked about Brooks not being able to turn off the outside noise. Like he could hear everything that everyone was saying in the gallery, and like it really messed with him. It might have been 2023, because that was also when Brooks afterwards, he went and spent like all night with his buddy when he got home, and they went like shot by shot.
The Masters.
And they went through like what was going through his head, and he like diagnosed it and was like, I just wanted it way too much, and I kept thinking about like too much stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I've always like I know I say like, you know, Brooks kind of talks out both of them into his mouth, but he's always been one of my favorite players, just because obviously of the major record, but I don't know, just like the toughness too, and kind of the ability to do things that not a lot of guys could do.
He's so on his career, he's got 18 top 10s in majors and 37 starts, roughly like a 50% top 10 percentage. He's got 20, or I guess he's at 42, 18 to 42. So he's a little below 50%. 25 top 25s in 42 events. And then the top fives is so impressive. 14, 14 top fives in 42 events. It's nuts. And then you obviously have the 5 wins. I feel like we're having this discussion because it feels like kind of another moment. I think there's been a few moments of Brooks, the injuries, the knee in particular. I think there's a moment where he himself, along with the hip, thought it might be over. And obviously that he had the resurgent 23, which, he almost won the Masters. John Rahm ended up winning that one, and he wins Oak Hill. And I think like a lot of people had pretty high expectations of Brooks in 24, and it was met with fairly lackluster play. He won twice on the Live Tour, whatever that means. And in the majors, he made the cut at all of them, but he wasn't really a factor in any of them, which was, I think when we've had healthy Brooks Koepka, you expect him to be there late on the weekend, and that just wasn't the case this year. So it kind of, I think, leaves us with, are we at the end of the Koepka era? Are we on the backside? Is there a few more years of really high level play?
Brentley?
I think so. And I don't think this past year was necessarily as much to do with health in the body as, maybe, the injuries before that, like you mentioned, the kneecap and the knee that also kind of led to the hip injury, which we see so often with these guys. They try to play hurt and they end up doing something to injure another part of their body. But I think the big thing last year was just the putting. And I've always thought amongst the elite major players in the game the last decade, your Rorys, your Spieths, your DJs, I've always thought like Brooks was the best putter. Out of all the guys who could ball strike you to death, like he was also the best putter. And he was as high as like 5th strokes gained putting back in 16, 17, back when he won that first one. And he was always kind of around that 20 to 40 range on tour, and even better in the majors. And this year, clearly uncomfortable on the greens. Like if you extrapolate kind of his strokes gained, and and correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph, too, because you're a lot better with the stats than me, but basically just looking at those 4 majors that he played, he lost something around like 0.345 strokes on the greens, and that would have ranked like 160th on tour last year. And I know that he'd switch putters before the US Open. So he was clearly like, that was the part of his game that really let him down. And tee to green stats, like if you would have just taken those 4 major tournaments, he would have ranked behind only Scotty for the year. So I feel like the putting might be I don't know. I feel like putting's always kind of the easiest thing to get back sometimes, especially if you have been a good putter.
I don't know how you feel, Andy. Like I know at moments I've felt like Brooks is probably we're towards the end. I feel a lot.
He's 34.
Right. Yeah. Important to call that out. I feel less that way now. I think we just see that the true greats can do it at 38. Like we've seen Justin Rose and Adam Scott and Sergio Garcia play into their 40s. I don't know that Brooks Koepka is going to have that same longevity, but I think even if it's 2 years from now, like we could see underwhelming results in 2025 from Brooks in majors, and then him get a little healthier and put a couple good majors together when he's 36, 37. Like it's not like he's only been involved in the 5 majors that he's won. Like as we've already mentioned, he's been in the top 5 so often that I think it'd be a little crazy to discount him in general, but it's kind of this, there's so much variance. Like he could show up and miss the cut. It'll never surprise me, but he also could show up and win. I think what I would love to see from Brooks, and I'm a little skeptical of, is like, could he put together another year where he's in the top 15 in all 4 majors, or like in the top 8 in 3 of them. Like, I think that's probably pretty unlikely, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him win another one. Where are you, Andy?
I think it's tricky now with Brooks because you just don't see him very much, right?
Yeah.
And he just kind of pops up. And I think this has been an issue, and obviously it wasn't in 2023 for him when he almost won the Masters. But like I don't necessarily think that LIV's the best place to prepare for majors, right? You had the Eugenio Chichara, like it's not the best place for young players tour. I don't think it's the best place to prepare for majors tour either. You know, like you already see these guys are starting by playing an event under the lights in Saudi Arabia this week. And it's like, look at the head start that a guy like Rory has on the season as he's playing, you know, and I know these guys play some of the DP World Tour. The consistency of having to play on tour was a good thing for him.
I mean, to your point, Andy, I also think it gives you a little bit of a better idea of where you stack up. Like, I think that's a big part of it, that some of the LIV guys, frankly, are just a little delusional about the quality of play on their tour and finish tied for 9th and think that their game's in a better spot than it is, when if you're playing against a stacked field like Rory just was, like, I think it gives you a little bit of a better feel for what you need to work on, even more so than just the golf course argument, the courses that you're playing.
I think it's maybe a little bit deeper than that. And, you know, I think, yeah, I mean, John Rahm, Bryson, I don't know if it's necessarily even the competition. I think it's, the biggest thing for me is just the 54 holes, because, and also shotgun start. And it's so much different, especially at a major. If you're in the lead or you're in contention in a major and you don't tee off until 3 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, like the mental fortitude you have to have that entire morning from the time you wake up to the time you tee off, and then like you haven't even done the hard part yet. I just feel you can't simulate that on LIV. Like you're not having to watch a guy go out an hour and a half ahead of you and post a number. Like you basically just tee off and you all meet back at the clubhouse and sign your scorecards. I just think it's just a total different dynamic. And with Brooks specifically, like we just talked about, his entire career, like he gets up for the majors and like he doesn't get up for anything else. I'm surprised that he's won 5 times on LIV, just because I think that he still thinks the majors are above everything else, and that he's kind of just, I don't know. I mean, he's just playing golf. I don't know if this really means that much to him, to be honest with you, like these LIV tournaments. So
he's won 5 times on LIV and 4 times on the PGA Tour. Pretty wild.
I mean, maybe we're missing something. I mean, I haven't been to a LIV event, so I can't really judge, but it just doesn't seem, I don't know. The only things that concern me with Brooks as far as longevity and what we're going to see from him, because I don't think he had a bad major year. I mean, he didn't have a terrible major last year. I think the things with him are health. I mean, the guy's had, you know, a severe wrist injury, 2 severe knee injuries, a severe hip injury. You know, so that stuff it goes away, like maybe specific injuries, but if you're prone to stuff like that, maybe it doesn't. So I think that's a big thing. And then he also doesn't have a swing coach right now. Like he has Pete Cowan, who, you know, has mainly just been short game kind of / mental coach for him. He's had Jeff Pierce, who's been his putting coach forever, who's a really great coach, but he doesn't work with Claude anymore. And so who knows, like, could that be a good thing, taking ownership of his own swing and kind of moving forward like we've seen from some other guys in the past? Or, you know, I feel like that's such a mid-30s PGA Tour or professional golfer move. Mid-30s, you take ownership of your swing. Yeah, and who knows? I mean, like I said, maybe that's the best thing for him. But I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic, and who knows? Like professional golf could look a lot different in 2 years, to where we see Brooks Koepka a lot more. And yeah, he's like you say, he's 34. I mean, I'm 34. I don't feel that old. I think he's still got a good decade of solid major play ahead of him.
I wouldn't maybe go decade. I think like we could build in a year or two of injury just with his past. I think you get to 40 and it's kind of like a crapshoot. So, in my calculation, this is just, he's got about 16 majors left. At his current clip, that gets him to 7 or 8 for total. If he kept the percentage he was at right now, which seems unrealistic.
Hold on, you're saying extrapolating. If he were to win at the same rate as he has in the past over the next 16, he would get 2 to 3 more. You're saying?
Yeah,
it feels like a stretch, but
yeah, I mean that's like just like the math, right?
Okay.
He would get like 2 more, so he gets to 7. I think that's kind of unrealistic, probably. I think there's probably one more left in there. If I had a gun to my head, I think he gets one more. I don't know if he gets one more. I think like what'll be interesting, him and Rory are effectively the same age, is who ends up with more majors at the end of the day. Brooks having a 1 major lead is, and I think this is like a interesting undercard that has a lot of I guarantee when Brooks won his 5th, that couldn't have made Rory happy, because it's like there's a badge of honor of being like if you take Tiger out of active and Phil out of active player, the active player with the most majors, right?
Absolutely. Rory has said it. He said it in the Netflix Full Swing thing. Like, I know Brooks has more majors than I have now. Like, they're obviously all aware of it.
I mean, who would you pick to have more majors at the end of their career? No, you get one major lead with Brooks.
Brentley, curious what you think. I would take Rory. I believe that
from now until the end, yeah.
I think this calendar year is such a good opportunity for Rory and the level he's playing and the longevity he's shown, that I believe he'll get one over the next 2 to 3 years. And as soon as he ties it up, I think the odds get way in his favor, just given Brooks's injury history. But if they finish their careers and Brooks finishes with 6 and Rory ends on 4, it's not going to shock me. I wouldn't be running to the bank to go take out a huge loan and make a bet against Brooks's future compared to Rory. Like, Rory may not win another one. So I don't know. I think I would take Rory, but curious what you think, Brentley.
It's kind of recency bias. I think he may have found something with this TP5 ball switch, the degree lower, similar amount of spin. I don't know. I feel like Rory, like Brooks is, if you look at all the different aspects of the game, like Brooks has never been a great chipper of the golf ball, like great around the greens. Like he's always kind of consistently been right around the top, 100th to outside the top 100 in strokes gains around the green. I feel like Rory has been more consistent across the board than Brooks has. And, if Brooks if he's not going to figure out the putting anytime soon, like he could waste another year or 2 of majors. And Rory right now is playing some of the best golf that he's playing. So I could see Rory winning 2 majors this year. And if Brooks doesn't get it going for another couple years, like that's a pretty big head start. So yeah, I'd go Rory, probably a little bit of recency bias, but I do think Brooks wins at least one more.
Still on the Pebble Beach high.
Yeah, I'm always on the Pebble Beach high. Well, I mean, you said 6 years of
Brooks.
2031. I think it's Kiowa potentially for the PGA.
We're not projecting out venues in 2031. We're not doing that.
Riviera for the U.S. Open in 2031, and then I don't know where the Open is. It might be is that a that's not a that's not an old course year.
We're not doing course.
I mean, one of the crazy things with Brooks is he's had close calls at Augusta. I mean, we're like very close to him being he was close at Portrush too. It's I think like every year fits well for Brooks. I think one of the things with Brooks is the other aspect of it, like 2017, 2018 Brooks versus today. I don't think he's as much of a force with the driver as he used to be.
I also just think that's a really interesting point, Andy, for how much we harp on Rory and great players who haven't won the Masters yet. I mean, how do we not talk about Brooks the same way? When you think about who's at that Champions dinner and who has won at Augusta, Brooks deserves as much of that conversation right now as Rory does. And yeah, I think his chances of winning the Masters are arguably higher than Rory's, just given how Rory tends to get a little loose out there.
It's fascinating that after Oak Hill, I feel like the discourse was like, can Brooks get to 8 or 9? And now, we're a year and a half later, a year, almost 2 years later, I guess. And now it's like, can he get to 6? What would you put the over under on? Is 6.5 the right over under? Or is it 5.5?
It's 5.5.
Yeah. Yeah. The over unders are always very conservative because it's so hard. I mean, you got so many guys who can win majors now. I mean, Ludwig's already a force in majors. Guys coming out.
Is he though? He hit one good major so far.
Well, no, but I'm just
I
talking
believe
about.
He's a force.
I mean,
Colin,
yeah, but
Bryson.
Colin, but no, but like
Xander.
As far as like his game is built for majors, and he hasn't really led me to believe otherwise. So yeah, I mean, heck, I'd throw Luke Clanton in there. Luke Clanton's going to win like 4 majors. We're going to be doing one of these.
Is he going to get a special exemption into the Masters?
No, he's not going to get that. He's got to play a college tournament at some point. He's he'll be all right though.
All right, this was fun. Anybody got any last Brooks thoughts to get off their chest?
I got one.
That you just, all right, I figured.
Got one moment we did not touch on that I just think is funny and illustrative of Brooks Koepka and his major alpha energy. The 2015 Open, when the ball is oscillating on the green, and Brooks Koepka is a complete unproven entity at this point. He hasn't even played 10 major championships, and some rules official comes up to him, I guess, makes it clear that he's a sir, the rules official, referring to himself, and Brooks says, allegedly, I don't care, I don't give an F who you are, I'm not playing until my ball stops oscillating, and then shortly thereafter, they halt play. Do you think that's a pretty fits in with a lot of Brentley's characterizations of a young Brooks? The brash, like some of the arrogance, kind of maybe was a sign that he did not feel uncomfortable in that environment. I think it's a pretty interesting moment in the Koepka. If we're going to do the Koepka pod, we got to mention that.
This is not meant to be like a full blown Koepka, because if we wanted to do that, there needs to be lots of discourse about the move to live, the Bryson beef, Kiwa near miss, getting steamrolled by Phil on Sunday. There's so many layers to that. This was kind of more of a check-in of where are we? What are we doing? And where do we think he goes? And I think everybody's pretty positive on Brooks and where it is. I think generally believe that we are going to see more high level major play from him in the calendar year.
I got one more thing that would be perfect to sign off with. And
all right,
my all time favorite Brooks Koepka moment was a exchange that he had with Smartin at, I believe, a tour championship a few years back. And basically, this is when Brooks had the off-white zip tie on his shoe. And so Smartin, being the intrepid reporter that he is, said, people were asking what's on your shoes. Oasis, ? Brooks goes, the off-whites? It's fashion, bro. No, the other. Brooks, this is such a typical golf nerd, like 40-year-old white man. And Smartin goes, I have 2 kids. It was like the best exchange ever, and one that I will file away from me for the rest of my life.
Amazing. All right. Well, that does it. Big thanks to Brentley. You can read his work at Golf Channel. You can see him on Golf Channel. Joseph, I've loved your Wednesday article every week on our website, thefriedegg.com. And big thanks to PJ Clark for producing and editing this podcast. I'm missing the start of the Johnny's game. Big night for the Johnnies against Marquette, but he's producing this podcast instead.